So most of the time when you buy things anywhere in the marketplace, you have a lot of choices to make, right? When you buy a soda, when you buy a cheeseburger, you can choose all kinds of things about what you're going to buy. One of the things we're great at is altering choices based on size. There's the family size, there's the compact size, there's the perfect size for whatever it is that you want to do. One of the things we're not very good at is providing a lot of choice in the marketplace when it comes to housing. And a lack of choice very often leads to a lack of affordability. Anybody today that's dealing with a lack of affordability in your local housing market, as we are very often in West Michigan, a big reason for that is because there's a lack of choice in the marketplace. So what you're seeing right now is an example of a local zoning ordinance. Zoning is often adopted by a local municipality, city or township. And very often what they do is they regulate things based on size. They regulate homes based on where they can be placed, how big the lot is, how big the unit can be, how big the bedrooms have to be, in some instances, how many closets you have. And very often these regulations are imposed by benevolent planning commissioners who are trying to do the right thing for the community based on community input, based on preservation of property values, based on the character of the existing surroundings. But what we don't understand is that all of those little decisions add up to big costs. So over time, the cost of sticks, 2x4s, and drywall and roofing materials every time you add a closet, or you add a bedroom, or you add an extra 150 square feet, you're adding cost for the end consumer. And you're eliminating choice from the equation. So the result is we get a lot of neighborhoods that look like this. And I've been really impressed by the number of conversations we've had today about the importance of connection. And I want you to think about this neighborhood relative to maybe your own neighborhood. And the fact that in this site plan, the drawing shows an individual swimming pool in every backyard. Right? What happened to community connection? What happened to the public swimming pool? Right? We're designing our communities in a way that eliminates that connectivity, in ways that allow us not to look our neighbors in the eye. And in a lot of instances, this kind of community is important. There's an important place for this community in the marketplace, and an important place for this type of housing in the marketplace, but we've got to have alternative choices. And very often, what we're not doing is building those choices into our environment. So think about this kind of a housing unit today typically costs about $165 to $200 a square foot to build. And so if the local zoning ordinance says that that housing unit has to be at least 1,500 square feet in order for it to be legal in your municipality, you're creating a minimum cost of $250,000 to $280,000 to build that unit. Then you add on the cost of acquisition for the land, plus the hookup for utilities, plus all of the other amenities that need to go into the unit, and you're looking at minimum housing prices in our market today of $285,000 to $325,000. Which is great for a segment of the marketplace, but it's not great for a much bigger segment of the marketplace. So here's an example of what local zoning does very often. We establish minimum lot size, minimum lot coverage, minimum setbacks, and it creates a very small box within which we can put things. And that lack of choice results in a lack of affordability and results in a lack of opportunity for the two biggest generations in our society today. So millennials and baby boomers are the biggest generations we've ever seen in the United States of America. And 1/3 of baby boomers right now demand a walkable urban environment, and they prioritize place over size. 2/3 of millennials prioritize place over size. They would much rather have a walkable urban environment when all other things are equal than have a suburban drivable environment. So this is a graph of wage distribution in Ottawa County. The numbers aren't important. What's important is low end is $10,000 a year salaries, and at the far right is $200,000 a year salaries. The vast majority of incomes are on that left-hand spectrum. More than 60% of our population is earning incomes below what it requires to be able to afford a $250,000 to $300,000 a year home. So this housing type is actually significantly in demand in the marketplace, but we don't allow for it in most of our municipalities. We don't allow for it in most of our townships, in most of our cities, in many of our urban corridors. Part of the reason for that is because those unit types tend to have smaller square footages. They tend to have more urban footprints. And the problem with that is local zoning outlaws that. They say it's not big enough, our standards in our local municipality. Here's an example of a kitchen, 64 square feet. Very often we require kitchens to be something more like 150 or 250 square feet. The sprawling open floor plan that you always see in Better Homes and Gardens, or that you see on HGTV, is great if you can afford it. It's not so great if you can't. Here's a 45 square foot dining room. It's great if you can have a big sprawling dining room, but if you can't afford it, why should we mandate it? Here's a cottage cluster of houses. These houses don't sit on individual lots. They share a central courtyard. These cottages average somewhere between 700 and 900 square feet. But for the most part, these are not legal in most of West Michigan because they're too small. This townhouse has a 900 square foot footprint. It's not legal in most of West Michigan because it's too small. This is a carriage house with an apartment above a garage. This is a great opportunity not only to build affordability into an existing neighborhood, but also to build in opportunities for existing homeowners to add wealth and equity. So it's a source of income for maybe an aging single adult because they're able to rent out the apartment above their garage. And it's also an inexpensive way for a young millennial just out of college to rent someplace where they don't have to have a roommate, where they know they're in a safe neighborhood and they've got access to local police. But again, it's not legal in most of West Michigan. So here's an example of how we're prioritizing things for the most part. On the right, you've got an example of the amount of space that parking often takes up in our zoning codes and therefore in our built environment. Typically 1 to 2 parking spaces is the equivalent of a 650 square foot apartment. Very often we're mandating that any use that gets built has a minimum of 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit or 1 parking space for every 300 square feet of retail space. And so very often we get a lot more parking than we do housing units. And when there's more parking than there is housing, we get a shortage of housing and a plethora of parking. And so what happens in the marketplace is we all expect to have free and convenient parking everywhere we go, but we don't expect to have affordable housing everywhere we go. We've accepted the fact that housing gets too expensive. What if we flipped that? Right? What if we expected that there was affordable housing in every community? Not that it was luxurious or huge or that you had all of the amenities you could ever want, but there was a safe, dry, warm place to live in any community. Well, this is an example of the City of Hudsonville plan. There are people in your community today that are doing great things to plan for these types of communities. They're just outside the window of this building today are those beginning seeds of this kind of a community. But what's important is for you all to stay connected to that process. Whether you're local or regional or you've got a community at home elsewhere, it's important to be invested in these processes because people are making decisions about what can get built. They're making decisions about how big it has to be, about how it's going to be staged, about how it connects with other things in the community. And if you're not invested in those choices and participating in the conversation, very often you get the kind of product that we've gotten over the last 40 years. Which is great for a slice of the market, but not great for the entire market. So what we're advocating for is building places where connection is not only possible, but almost required. Is building places where you can go hang out at the local coffee shop, where you can come to a TEDx event and it's in walking distance to your apartment, where you can get food, you can go to the library, you can go to school and work, and you're able to make all of those choices because those choices were built into the urban environment based on decisions that the local unit of government made. I hope you'll all stay connected to your local unit of government, you'll stay connected to the process, and you'll become more invested in your local community. Thank you.